Hi, I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nick Nanos.
And welcome back to Trendline. Nick, so we're more than half a year into this pandemic. It looks like the fall and winter is going to be an endurance test for following public health guidelines. Is the pandemic still top of mind to Canadians, or are we becoming, I guess, inured to it?
Yeah, well, we're definitely not becoming desensitized, Michael, that's for sure. When we look at the trend line, we saw that at first initial spike of concern in the top national unprompted issue of concern. You can see the first spike in March, but check out that trend line. You can see that concern about coronavirus has now hit 35 percentage points, and that it's basically as high as it was back in April. Go figure. So we've got, if you talk about a second wave, we've got a second wave when it comes to concern about the coronavirus right now. Jobs at 14, health at 11, environment at 8. But the big news is that people worrying about the coronavirus and the pandemic is on the rise, and that this is a noticeable spike in this new world where there are hotspots everywhere, it seems. From Moncton to Ottawa, and it looks like Canadians have it on the radar in a big way.
Right, even the Atlantic bubble, as you said, in Moncton, they're showing an increase in cases. So it's
should
now
say
pretty much
the mighty Atlantic bubble, because
the mighty.
If
yes.
you talk to anyone from Atlantic Canada or the Maritimes, they have the bubbles. They're actually proud of how they've been dealing with the pandemic. And I think for some, they're a bit surprised that right now, I understand Moncton is one of the hot spots, and that they're, what do we say, joining the very sad party of countries that have to fight the pandemic in an even more serious way.
I mean, this past Thanksgiving weekend, there's a lot of conversations going on. Families in Canada, what do they do? Should they have more than one household meet? I mean, we had kind of different guidelines depending on where you live, but this has been dragging on for so long now. You did a survey on how it's impacting Canadians' mental health, and what did you find out from that?
Well, what we found is that a significant proportion of Canadians report that their mental health is getting weaker or somewhat weaker. It's about, I think, 40% fall into those two categories, while only about 11% say that their mental health is better. So by a margin of 4 to 1, people are more likely to say that their mental health is on the decline as a result of the pandemic. It speaks to, the thing about this particular pandemic, and that's why Canadians are so transfixed on it. There's the physical health implications, there's the mental health implications, and there's also the economic health implications. It's kind of like, what else is left that could make it difficult for people to cope with? And I guess maybe that what else is the isolation and the inability of people to see their family in the same way as they did in the past. But it's definitely having a negative impact on Canadians' mental health. And realistically, only 1 out of 10 Canadians say that their mental health is better today than it was before the pandemic. People are much more likely to say that it's worse or much worse.
Now, economically, in my neighborhood here in Toronto, I'm seeing a lot of restaurants struggling to stay afloat. Some of them haven't made it. Small businesses across the country are really struggling. Are we still seeing support for shutting things down if cases surge, or Canadians sort of backing away from that?
It's kind of like people don't want the government to let up on fighting this pandemic. In the recent survey that we just did for CTV News, about 45% of Canadians outright support closing non-essential businesses, not all business, non-essential businesses. Another 25 somewhat support, while only about 29% oppose or somewhat oppose. So pretty comfortable majority. And think of it this way, Michael. According to Statistics Canada, of people that were active in the workforce before the pandemic, 4 out of every 10 are on CERB or receiving some type of support and are staying home. So it shouldn't be a big surprise that there's a significant proportion of Canadians that are kind of like, what, if we have a second round, if we have a flare up, if we need to fight the pandemic, it's okay that non-essential businesses be closed. But the killer here is the impact on the economy. And I think maybe can we give a little piece of advice to politicians?
Sure.
Would you like to do that?
Yeah.
I think what would be, it's pretty clear the public health officials know what needs to be done to fight the pandemic. But I think part of that discussion has to include some economists and what it means for the economy. And maybe we shouldn't have politicians making decisions about the pandemic from an economic and health perspective. Maybe we should have public health officials and economists work it out and what the trade-offs are. And then if they could talk amongst themselves and maybe have a solution, then to present that to politicians. But, I think for a lot of Canadians, the big problem is uncertainty. It's like day by day, week by week, the rules change. And I think that's what makes it frustrating. So one week there's some sort of hockey that boys and girls could play. And then another week it's like, oh, they can't scrimmage. Or this week they can scrimmage, or they're just doing drills. So it's that uncertainty that creates just another overlay of stress.
Oh, we see, absolutely. We see Ontario Premier Doug Ford kind of got into trouble with confused messaging before the Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, he's clearly weighing public health risks versus economic risks, and it wasn't until recently that he basically said, please don't let households mix for Thanksgiving. But Nick, I want to move on to the federal government now. They are under tremendous pressure to do more for these small businesses. And that seems to be the new focus of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So I just want to play a quick clip, though, because Conservatives, now that the House is back in action, want to bring up the WE scandal again. But Trudeau, of course, wants to focus on what the government is doing for COVID-19. So let's listen to Trudeau.
We are entirely focused on the second wave of COVID-19. We are working to support Canadians, to support workers, to support families, to support small businesses as we get through this second wave. We will continue to stay focused on what we need to do to support Canadians facing a very difficult time right now.
So there you go. Nick, does it make sense for the Liberals to 100% focus on COVID-19?
Well, for them it does, because the thing is what our polling shows is that many times, whether this is fair or unfair, the Canadians judge governments based on what they see in the news. So that when the government, for example, in the past was focused on explaining the WE controversy and clarifying things, and the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff were testifying before the House of Commons, for average Canadians, it looks like they're focused on defending an ethics issue as opposed to focusing on the pandemic. So I can understand from a Liberal perspective why they want to say that they are firmly focused on the pandemic. At the same time, I get it from a Conservative perspective, because this is a vulnerability. When you looked at, we talked in previous podcasts on how the Liberal numbers got hammered. Well, we derailed all the goodwill that the Liberals built up over the course of the pandemic. And I think what the Conservatives are at least hoping for is that they can feed the fire with more committee hearings and a focus on the WE controversy, because what are the Conservatives going to criticize the Liberals for? Like helping Canadians through the pandemic, right? Like,
yeah,
maybe you shouldn't do that, right? Maybe you can say the deficit's too big, but you got to be careful when you tread in that. I think the Conservatives see the WE controversy as a clear, hard, sharp punch on the Justin Trudeau brand and the Liberal brand, which is why they're going to try to keep this alive.
So in our last episode, you showed new ballot tracking numbers, and the Conservatives under new leader Aaron O'Toole had managed to tie the Liberals for the first time in a long time. I can't remember when that happened before. Where are they now?
Yeah, exactly. We look at these trajectories and it's like, are they still going up? Are they still going up? Are they going down? Or what's going on?
Yeah.
Latest weekly Nanos tracking that we've just released has the Liberals at 35, Conservatives at 33, NDP are at around 15, Bloc 7, Green Party at 8 or thereabouts. So it's still a statistical tie, factoring the margin of error for the survey, because it's about plus or minus 3 percentage points 19 times out of 20. But it's not an absolute numerical tie. So we'll have to see. Can we tell people to tune into future trend line?
Yes, please tune in
to get your hit on the ballot tracking. But it's going to be interesting to see whether will it be a new trajectory, or will it basically continue to be a coin toss on the national ballot numbers. But can I put a little? I can't draw. Can you draw an asterisk on the screen? I'd like to
We'll
put
put it
pollsters,
in post-production.
pollsters asterisk on the screen.
Hmm.
Even though, when we model out this to seats, so this is popular support, so you might think, hey, that's really close. When Nanos internally, and we do this every week, does seat projections, we do this internally so that I can be smart in my analysis, is that even though the Liberals and the Conservatives are statistically tied, the Liberals win 24, count it, 2-4, more seats than the Conservatives, because the Liberal support is much more efficient at converting into seats than the Conservative support, where they've got massive advantages in Western Canada, but they don't convert into number of seats. So Conservative viewers out there, you should be happy that you're competitive in terms of the ballot numbers, but you got to be thinking that Conservative campaign machine has to be more efficient at spreading out those Conservative votes in order to win more seats. So that's a little pollsters asterisk.
Great. Now, the Prime Minister has a new opposition rival in the House. Well, not technically in the House because she hasn't won a by-election, but Annamie Paul was named the new leader of the Green Party. She is the first Black woman to be elected to lead a major political party. I say elected because in 2011, Vivian Barbeau led the Blocs as an interim leader. I just want to play a clip for what her win means.
So what I bring is hope to all the people that have not seen themselves represented in politics to this point. Hope that it's possible that we can have a more inclusive style of politics, and I'm very excited about that.
So Nick, what does this mean for the dynamics in the House?
Well, I think it could be a potential game changer. We have to remember that the Green Party is it's an interesting, I will call it, political beast, right? It's not a traditional party, doesn't have a lot of baggage. It benefits from a global brand, right? Where, the Greens are now, a significant force in major democracies like Germany, where they will probably be a coalition partner. And, even provincially, we're seeing, Greens picking up seats in New Brunswick, the Greens winning seats in BC provincially. They won a seat in Ontario. So they're in a bit of an interesting space, and I think she'll be intriguing for a lot of Canadians. And I think Justin Trudeau has to watch the Greens as kind of like a bit of a, why don't we call it, a friendly, not a hostile, but a friendly protest vote.
Right.
Because our polling suggests, I crunched the numbers this morning, Michael. When I look at those ballot numbers, and about 3 out of every 10 committed Liberal supporters would consider voting Green.
3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Yeah, that, as we would say, that is not insignificant.
No.
Right? So it's kind of like, and I think what Justin Trudeau has to watch out is for younger Liberal supporters. And the other thing that we learned in the last election, if you remember, there was a point in time when Green Party support kind of picked up and Liberal Party support dropped. That coincidentally happened when Greta Thunberg was in Montreal and gave the Prime Minister a bit of a rough ride, saying he hadn't done enough. And millennial voters switched from the Liberals to the Greens. So I think the Greens are in an interesting space. A significant proportion of Canadians are open to voting for them. Liberals would consider voting for the Green, and they've got a new leader. It's going to be interesting to see how the new leader, what vision that they articulate for the Green Party. But this new leader is a very accomplished individual, Annamie Paul. She's an inspirational speaker. Looks like she's looking at building the Green Coalition, and it'll be interesting to see whether she can take it to the next level. Because I don't think anybody should dismiss the good work of Elizabeth May. Let's for anyone, whether they love, hate, or indifferent related to the Greens, Elizabeth May put the Greens on the political agenda. She carried the standard for a number of years effectively, and stepped down when she thought that she could not take it any further. And now we have this new leader. So let's see what happens. But I think the Liberals should be taking the Greens seriously, because they could be a protest vote against the Liberals.
And Nick, as I said before, Paul does not have a seat in the House. She's waiting for a by-election, but she herself has said she doesn't want any by-election race right now because of the pandemic. And and the inherent health risks for that. What are the risks, I suppose, for her for not having a seat in the House? Does it help or hurt her?
Can we go like this? I don't
Yeah,
know. I think we need more infographics. There's
more
juggling
post-production.
could go either way.
Mm.
Well, first of all, the by-elections are happening. York and Toronto Centre.
Mm.
They are going to happen. I think, Toronto Centre is a riding that she has run in the past. She didn't do that well in Toronto Centre, but it might be a little unfair to say that she hadn't done well because she was effectively a parachute at the last minute into the riding when she ran
Right.
this time. That said, Toronto Centre, boy, oh boy, that is a Liberal stronghold. I think more than 25 years it's been in the red column. So winning that is going to be tough. That said, one interesting thing about that particular riding is that University of Ryerson is there, 40,000 students. We know from our polling that Greens tend to do a little better among students, millennials, younger voters. They tend to do some of the ridings that they picked up, for example, the ridings in New Brunswick, provincially, is in, I think, the same riding that Mount Allison was in, where they were very good at mobilizing students to vote for the Green Party.
Yep.
So I think in Toronto Centre, the Greens can do respectably if they're organized, and what they need, a number of things to happen. First of all, they need to mobilize students to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that they would need to do is to make Toronto Centre a by-election, not a by-election, a referendum on the Liberal Party, right? Because the fact of the matter is that even if the Liberals lose Toronto Centre, they're still the government. So the Greens could go in, if they were smart, they'd say, send a message to Ottawa. If you're disappointed with how slow the Liberals have been on the environment and think they could have done more, send a message through your, not to sound like Spider-Man, your friendly neighborhood Green candidate.
Right.
And to take advantage of that, where there might be progressive voters that might be disappointed with the Liberals on a number of issues, know that the Liberals will not be defeated, so they don't have to worry about the Conservatives coming in and saying, hey, why not vote Green this time, and give them a vote. That said, winning that by-election would be an unbelievably major accomplishment for any Green candidate, and I would say for any candidate to win that other than the Liberals. But I think there is a chance if they ran a good campaign on the ground that they could do respectably.
That's more free advice from the Trendline podcast out there. That's pretty good, Nick.
There we go.
I want to go south of the border now, where, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing the headlines. The election's already over. Biden's up 12 points. Is it
What's
done?
it make today?
Has he won? So what do you make of this, of these headlines and the polling there?
Well, I think we have to be careful. What's clear in the polling that's out there in the public domain from the respectable pollsters, at least, is that the marginal advantage, or the advantage that Biden did enjoy, is now widening. Anywhere from 12 to 14 points, depending on which piece of research that you look at. I would watch out for the technical correction. It's kind of like politics. Many times is like the stock market. Like a stock sometimes runs up because there's exuberance and momentum in the stock, and then at some point, someone says, "I think that's a little overpriced." And I think what the Democrats have to watch out for is that that 12 to 14 point advantage drops a little bit. The good news is that it could drop a lot. Like it could drop to 5 points, and it could still be a big win for the Democrats. But it's going to be interesting to see what will Donald Trump do to try to reverse the trend, because there's only so much more runway left in this U.S. election to turn things around. It usually takes maybe 10 days for a trend to reverse itself. So, tick-tock, Donald Trump. Time's running out for you to reverse this trend that is currently favoring Biden. But if you're asking for a bet, I would say that Biden's still on track to win. He'll still have a comfortable win, but I'm not sure it will be the fantastical, over the top 12 to 14 point advantage that we're currently seeing now in the polls.
Wow. Nick, I think that's it for this episode. Do you have a prediction or a takeaway? What do you have for us this episode?
Well, I think the one key takeaway right now, at least in Canada, is we have a new leader of the opposition in Erin O'Toole, the leader of the Conservative Party. We now have a new leader of the Green Party. Congratulations, Parliament. The table is now set with the key actors for the next federal election. It's going to be interesting. No, it's going to be interesting to see
Yeah.
how both Erin O'Toole and Annamie Paul decide to lead their parties and how they differentiate themselves. So I think it'll be, the key takeaway is the actors for the next election are set. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in order to get political traction.
All right. Nick, as always, thank you very much.
It was fun.
And where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Nick, N-I-K Nanos, or you can go to the website, www.nanos.co, for all those oodles of stats.
And I'm also on Twitter at Michael Stittle, and you can find more information on what Nick and I have talked about this episode also at CTVNews.ca. Thanks, as always, for listening and watching.